Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 10 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation C.H.A.D. We begin this segment with the Sector V operatives of the Kids Next Door watching video footage of Kids Next Door operatives from other sectors throughout the world being attacked by a shadowy figure. This shadowy figure is using a laser ray of some kind, and any Kids Next Door operative that's hit with this laser ray is trapped in a translucent blue container with purple energy around the container. In the segment itself, the characters refer to this as the operatives being stupefied. And at least for us, the audience members, we see video footage of the Kids Next Door operatives in France, Egypt, and China being attacked by this shadowy figure. And we also see a flying vehicle in the background of each of these scenes. By the time the last of this video footage is viewed by the Sector V operatives, Number 1 suspects that they, the Sector V operatives, might be the only Kids Next Door operatives who haven't been stupefied yet. And the other Sector V operatives question Number 1 about what they should do, but Number 1 admits that he's not entirely sure. Suddenly, they receive they receive a video message from a blonde boy with mostly red armor. He's wearing armor that's mostly colored red. And the video message itself, both the video and the words, are scrambled, so the Sector V operatives and we, the viewers, don't get a clear indication about this boy's message. And Number 5, however, was able to pinpoint the location of this boy's vehicle, and the Sector V operatives are determined to help this boy, figuring that he might be the only other Kids Next Door operative besides themselves who hasn't been stupefied yet. So the Sector V operatives head out in a flying vehicle of their own to reach the boy, and they're wearing matching defense armor. Eventually, they arrive at the boy's location, which is an airport of some kind. And when they arrive, they find the boy. His vehicle is destroyed, and he's lying on the ground. When they turn him over so that his face is facing upwards, they actually get to see his designated number in the Kids Next Door. He's number 274. And the Sector V operatives comment to each other about how number 274 is supposed to be a very famous operative among the Kids Next Door, said to be one of, if not the most legendary of the Kids Next Door operatives. And while they're talking to each other about Kids Next Door related collectibles, number 274 seems to regain consciousness, and he questions why they've arrived, because he's afraid of their well-being because of how this shadowy figure has been going after Kids Next Door operatives. Number 274 is concerned about the Sector V operatives' well-being, but the Sector V operatives insist that they must help a fellow Kids Next Door operative. Suddenly, the shadowy figure that we've been seeing in the video footage from earlier reveals herself. She's wearing an outfit that allows her to fly, and she's wearing a mask, and her voice sounds like it's filtered because of the mask. But this individual reveals herself to be Mega Mom, and she prepares her stupefying rays. She attacks the Sector V operatives and number 274 with her stupefying rays. Although the Sector V operatives do try to fight back, Mega Mom still has a clear advantage over them, and number 274 tries to warn them that fighting her head-on won't do them any good. Number 1 eventually concedes to number 274's point, and they all try to retreat. But Mega Mom is able to hit one of number 5's feet with her stupefying rays. So number 274 is able to help number 5 out so that they can all get into their flying vehicle and escape. And they are able to, yes, they do successfully escape from Mega Mom. While they're flying back to the Sector V treehouse, number 274 insists that they drop him off elsewhere, but the Sector V operatives respond that they're not going to abandon number 274 during this crisis. Number 274 responds that he seems to be the target because wherever he goes, Mega Mom has followed after him, and that's why he feels responsible for the other Kids Next Door operatives being stupefied and why he intends to take on this threat by himself. The Sector V operatives are impressed by his speech, and number 4 wants his autograph. Number 274 accepts, number 274 is willing to give number 4 an autograph, but he charges $1 for it. But despite the speech, though, the Sector V operatives are still insistent about helping number 274 all the same. So they return to the Sector V treehouse, and they hope to figure out how to help number 5 out with her foot that's been stupefied in the medical lab before they figure out a new plan of action regarding dealing with Mega Mom. On their way to the medical lab, number 3 questions number 274 about where the dad is since they've seen Mega Mom, and this causes number 274 to remember that yes, there is a dad, and before he can finish his train of thought, though, the dad does appear in the Sector V treehouse. He calls himself Destructo Dad, and Mega Mom arrives shortly after Destructo Dad arrives, and Destructo Dad and Mega Mom do manage to stupefy all of the Sector V operatives. Number 5 is the last of the Sector V operatives to be stupefied, and yes, she's completely stupefied by the end of the invasion on the treehouse. That leaves number 274 as the only Kids Next Door operative who hasn't been stupefied yet, and he says that he tells Mega Mom and Destructo Dad that it was a mistake of them to not stupefy him because he is, in his words, the greatest of the Kids Next Door operatives. And Mega Mom and Destructo Dad actually agree with this, and then they take off their masks, and number 274 is surprised to see that Mega Mom and Destructo Dad are actually his parents, although it is curious that he was surprised because their masks actually look like their actual faces, just maybe a little bigger than their actual faces. But yeah, generally speaking, the masks were kind of paper-thin disguises. But I digress. So it turns out Mega Mom and Destructo Dad actually did what they did because they felt bad that they thought number 274 was such a high number, and they wanted their son C.H.A.D to be number 1 of the Kids Next Door operatives. And they tried to assure him that the operatives aren't actually hurt and they can still see, so they can see the greatness of their son. Number 274, though, finds this rather embarrassing, and he decides to counterattack by pulling out a cell phone. And what he does is he's calling various individuals regarding extracurricular activities, and he's canceling his extracurricular activities. And each time he does so, Destructo Dad and Mega Mom act like they've been hit when they haven't actually been hit. It's like just the calling is like affecting them as if they were hit. So figurative, I guess you could say it's figurative, but I digress. So besides the extracurricular activities being canceled, number 274 also makes calls about accepting a position on a rock band, and he calls a tattoo parlor before finally Mega Mom and Destructo Dad relent, or they give up. They say that they beg him not to continue, and they'll do what he requests. So naturally, number 274 requests them to unstupefy the other kids next door operatives. So we do see video footage of the other kids next door operatives throughout the other sectors of the world free of the stupefying rays, and they're thanking number 274 for what he did for them. Afterwards, number 274 says to the Sector V operatives that he feels bad that his parents went through all that trouble and were the cause of all of that. But the Sector V operatives assure number 274 that it's not his fault for what his parents have done, and they comment that parents are weird in general. Suddenly, Mega Mom and Destructo Dad arrive in a flying car just outside the Sector V treehouse, telling number 274 that it's almost time for his violin lesson. So number 274 says goodbye to the Sector V operatives, and he leaves to go to his violin lessons. And number 4 admits to his teammates that even though he did acknowledge parents can be weird in general, he does admit that he thinks number 274's parents are the weirdest among them all. And the segment ends with the other Sector V operatives agreeing with this sentiment. So this segment introduces us to an important character, number 274. And yes, like I said, he goes on to become a very important character throughout the rest of the series. And Tom Warburton had admitted on one of his blog posts that he and the other staff members of the show didn't anticipate number 274 becoming as important of a character as he ended up becoming, especially with all the other various events that happened regarding number 274. They never anticipated that. So you could say this is a good example of, this actually would be, a good example of an analogy that George R.R. Martin, the author of the Song of Fire and Ice books, had mentioned once in a quote. George R.R. Martin had described, he described an analogy regarding two different types of writers, the gardeners and the architects. And George R.R. Martin describes them as the gardeners are, they plant the seed, they know what type of tree that the seed will grow into, they water the seed, they give the seed sunlight, but they don't know how many branches the tree will have, they don't know how many leaves the tree will have, even though they know the general idea of the tree. The architects, in contrast, have the blueprints for the house all mapped out, right down to the wiring for the electricity or the piping for the plumbing before they even begin construction on the house. So naturally, from the way this is, based off of Tom Warburton's blog posts, it does sound like that Tom Warburton and the other staff members for the show had a gardener approach in a lot of situations. Like, they might have had a general idea of certain things, but maybe didn't have everything fully planned out right before they started. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, both the gardener and the architect approach with writing have their pros and cons. They both come with their advantages and disadvantages. And sometimes there can be situations where people have a blend of those situations. But most people do seem to agree, at least based off of my observations, most people seem to feel that the gardener approach was well executed with Codename Kids Next Door. And while I'm thinking about it, actually, the previous segment, an earlier segment, Operation Arctic, had shown that the Sector V operatives weren't the only Kids Next Door operatives in the world, because Arctic introduced number 30C, and the Kids Next Door global headquarters was mentioned in that segment as well. It's in this segment where we actually do get to see other sectors throughout the world regarding the Kids Next Door organization. And we also meet number 274, who's said to be a very famous member of the Kids Next Door. And I mentioned that detail because in season 2, they actually kind of explore number 274's status in greater detail. To be more specific, season 2 reveals that number 274 isn't just a famous or legendary operative among the Kids Next Door. He's actually the supreme leader or the supreme commander of the Kids Next Door organization in this season, season 1, and in season 2. Although it's not until season 2 when they outright say he's the supreme leader. Tom Warburton did admit that they hadn't thought out the idea of 274 being the supreme leader when they wrote this particular segment. It wasn't until season 2 when the rest of the Kids Next Door organization started to play a more significant role, when they realized they needed to have a character who was in charge of the entire organization. And they ended up going with number 274 because of his status as a legendary operative. And this is a good example of the Gardner approach being well executed, because even though they didn't have the idea of 274 being the supreme leader figured out just yet, it still ended up working out well. It felt organic because, yeah, a legendary operative being the supreme leader of the entire organization makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, that was a good example of the Gardner approach being executed well, I felt. And while I'm thinking about it, that's right. We should talk about Mega Mom and Destructo Dad, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. And it also kind of ties in with Operation Arctic as well, because Professor Triple Extra Large was presented as a Type 4 anti-villain, or a nominal villain, in the sense that he wasn't really evil. He was kind of just came to blows with the Kids Next Door due to a misunderstanding. And so I bring that up because Professor Triple Extra Large isn't actually evil, despite being considered a villain. And you could say the same thing for Mega Mom and Destructo Dad. They actually weren't really evil when you really think about it. At worst, they were more Type 3 anti-villains, or well-intentioned extremists, because, like I said, or like the segment showed, their intentions were because they thought that 274 was too high of a number for their son, and they wanted him to be number 1. They just didn't seem to realize that 274 was a designated number that C.H.A.D chose for himself with regards to the Kids Next Door organization. And yeah, like I said, at worst, they came off more as Type 3 anti-villains because they had good intentions. They just went about it the wrong way, or they took drastic measures to do so. And at best, you could see them as Type 4 anti-villains, or nominal villains as well, because this is really the only segment where Mega Mom and Destructo Dad actually play a significant role, and they appear on screen. Because they do appear in other segments or other entries in the series, but they're mostly just cameos in group shots with villain meetings. Similar to Professor Triple Extra Large, it does seem kind of curious that they would be in these villain meetings, despite not being outright evil. And I guess if someone were to take a guess for that, at least in this segment, it did seem like Mega Mom and Destructo Dad were kind of more just playing the role of a villain with regards to their actions, rather than actually being villainous. So maybe them being part of those villain meetings is just them playing the role of the villain still. Who knows? But yeah, they don't really directly antagonize the Kids Next Door after this particular segment. And it is, although now that I'm thinking about it, there is the season 2 finale actually does have them in a small role, big impact sort of role, because they don't actually appear in the season 2 finale, but they do something in that episode that really affects the plot of that episode. We'll go into greater detail about that when we reach the recap and thoughts video for that particular episode. But yeah, it is pretty interesting to note that number 274 goes on to become a very important character throughout the series, even though his parents don't really have many more significant appearances after this. Like I said, their only other major role is a small role, big impact role in the season 2 finale, where we don't actually even see them in person in that particular episode. And I did mention this in the previous recap and thoughts video as well. It's pretty amusing how Tommy and C.H.A.D, the two characters that were introduced in each segment of episode 10, and each segment of episode 10 was named after these two characters. It's interesting that they both end up playing a major role in the season 2 finale, and they both debuted in episode 10. Although they both had different segments that they appeared in. But it's pretty interesting all the same. So otherwise, yeah, I believe that's about it for now. So yeah, we do go on to see, like I said, number 274 will go on to become a more important character down the road. And it was cool that we got to see more of the global Kids Next Door organization in season 1, because it's not until season 2 when we actually get to see the organization as a whole in a more significant role. Season 1 as a whole is more about the Sector V operatives rather than the rest of the organization. But it's a nice first step, or second step, because Arctic introduced us to another operative besides the Sector V operatives. But yeah, it's cool to see them building up to the organization as a whole playing a bigger role in the series. But yeah, I think that's it for now. So as of this video, we've now discussed the B segment of episode 10 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.